Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi, I'm Gwen Callahan, the director of the HP Lovecraft Film Festival, and this panel was my idea, so I'm going to moderate it because I have yet to meet someone who actually likes moderating when they're supposed to be on the panel. This is from your right to your left is Sean Branney of the HP Lovecraft Historical Society, co-writer of Call of Cthulhu and director of, co-writer of Whisper in Darkness and director of Whisper in Darkness. Have you guys all seen Whisper in Darkness? Okay. Downstairs. Next is Dennis Paoli, screenwriter for such beloved Lovecraftian titles as Reanimator, Castle Freak, From Beyond, Suitable Flesh, and the list goes on. And in the center, we have Rebekah McKendry, Dr. Rebekah McKendry, podcaster, editor, author, filmmaker, writer, and director of Glorious, which we'll be showing tomorrow. And David Ian McKendry, producer, and I apologize, I don't know the rest of your credits, writer and producer. Okay. Right, co-writers. Okay, writing partners and life partners as well. And next to, all the way on the end, you may recognize him from being on stage last night, our other guest of honor, Clay McLeod Chapman. So we are fortunate to have two guests of honor this year. Rebekah and Clay are our guests of honor, and Dennis Paoli was a last-minute special guest because of the writer's strike ending. Yay!
I just showed up.
He just showed up. He wandered in off the street, and we pulled him in on this panel. So this panel is about putting cosmic horror on the screen. So a lot of Lovecraft's stories kind of all happen here. There's things that happen externally in the world, but a lot of the horror happens when the reader, along with the main character, protagonist, has some sort of revelation or something revealed to them. They get a peek behind the curtain of the universe, and it forever changes their perception of the world and the way they relate to it. And how do we show that on screen? This is the big question, because we have seen very faithful Lovecraft adaptations. If anyone has seen The Secret Screening, you guys know that a faithful adaptation is not necessarily a successful film. Which house? That house. So I would like to have you guys, and you can go in a row or just jump in if you have something to say. We don't stand on formality here. About the process of, I guess, writing a script for putting this on the screen. I'm interested in how you approach kind of breaking down what you're going to show and what you're going to try to convey through like what's happening on screen.
All right. I'll start the conversation. I would say, having done a great number of Lovecraft adaptations now, when you start with Lovecraft as source material, the man had almost no interest in drama. And he professed having no interest in drama. He actually was dramatic in spite of himself. He couldn't help himself in some stories that have some great dramatic sequences. But on the whole, he wasn't particularly interested in human beings and the human journey. On the other hand, over the last 3,000 years, since Aristotle really, storytelling, and particularly narrative storytelling through drama, has come up with a set of, I don't know if they're rules, but whatever Aristotle is, guidelines that have tended to shape how we experience storytelling. And generally, it's a subjective process where we get hooked behind a protagonist, whether it's Oedipus Rex or Hamlet or Herbert West. We as audience members hook our wagon to an engine and go along for the ride to follow a character's journey as they experience things. So I would argue that the fundamental nature of drama is really different than what Lovecraft was trying to accomplish. And I think, as Gwen alluded to, that if you stick purely to the Lovecraft, you're gonna have a pretty drab and uninteresting short story that, you can watch it, it can be done. But I think we as audience members tend to crave that journey, that arc, that transformation of human beings, because they become ciphers for us. And it's through their transformation that we come to understand that pulling behind the curtain and what Lovecraft was after, which was the great reveal of the dreadful secrets of the cosmos. So that's what I got.
It's not only his structure, his issue with dramatic structure, although to jump on that for a second, Aristotle notwithstanding, there are rules to feature film writing. And you want to get your film done, you got to follow certain rules. It's pretty much a 3-act structure. At 30 minutes, you have to have a beheading. The second act has to not wander too far before the third act is full of beheadings. So it's, you have to, I'm not sure Aristotle put it that way, but that's essentially what he was saying.
If you read him in Greek, he did, yeah.
So the other issue with Lovecraft is that he's a master stylist. It's so much of the effect of his work exists in the language and in the way he wrote. He was one of the true, I used to teach Gothic fiction, and while I never got to Lovecraft, I was able to refer to him often as one of the great American impressionists. His stories are impressionistic. The way impressionistic painters, you had to finish the painting in your head. You had to finish it in your eye, in your mind. The thing when we read Lovecraft, when you approach it when you're translating it into a visual style, especially when you have that 3-act structure, especially when you're imposing more, maybe not imposing, but trying to draw out that drama that actually is there. Plenty of his characters transform in absolutely horrific ways, but to draw it out and make it dramatic as opposed to impressionistic. So we just decided to Stuart, and by we I mean Stuart Gordon and I, please, momentary, 1 second of silence for Stuart Gordon. What we tried to do is go the other way entirely and become expressionistic. With the history of a horror film going all the way back to the cabinet of Dr. Caligari is expressionistic, is German expressionism. So we went the other way, and to just show it, it's film, you got to eventually show it. And we made a living showing it as often as we could. We just went the other way with it, while trying to be faithful to the spirit of that story, and to the ultimate effect that Lovecraft wanted to have, which was a horrific internal, a real fear that your own internal struggle would transform you into something as awful as the protagonist of Innsmouth, as Shadow over Innsmouth. So.
Yeah, I definitely want to echo that, and I know Dave will jump in here as well because we usually co-write, and it is that Lovecraft, in Hollywood, he's what we call, he's an idea man. And he's gonna throw this idea at you, and it's like a brilliant log line, but there's not a lot of story in that story. It's very much like this guy who wanders into this thing and he sees this thing and it makes him insane. And it's like, cool, you're trying to pull acts out of that, and you're trying to pull structure and character arcs and things like that. So you definitely have to expound on it quite a bit. He also, really like to spend a lot of time describing things that aren't necessarily things that you can visually picture on screen. Like, he was very into psychology and how somebody would go insane, and spending 3 pages describing the levels of the insanity. But when you're looking at it from a film perspective, it does not necessarily translate. Like, you can't just show insanity for, a solid 3 minutes for the most part. It's much difficult. Same with his monsters. Like, he was big into saying, the monster, it's so horrible, it's undescribable. And then he would spend 3 pages describing it, but not telling you much. Somewhere he was getting paid by the word. We're going to forgive him on that. But yeah, color's so indescribable, you can't imagine it. And so when you're reading it, you kind of have to...
Cancel lighting, guys. unimaginable color.
Yeah, like it just walking up to my VFX people being like a monster I can't imagine, like it, so you really have to kind of start nailing down some of those visuals. I will also say, from a female perspective, Lovecraft also primarily wrote really educated guys, and they don't always make the most interesting protagonists. So kind of varying that up and bringing some diversity in, totally fine. But yeah, it's in this day and age, we can definitely push into other protagonists as well. But you wrote Glorious.
Yeah,
so
I mean, the only thing I can really add to that is there's the film it has to be visual. You know, we have to see what we're going through, and when you have a described character arc or hero's journey from your lead of just he goes insane, you have to now show that. So I think, you know, Lovecraft is great at giving this idea and then letting you play with it. Like, you can do whatever you really want to it, and that's why we see so many films that are either trying to really recreate what was written, and those films that just use it as a story, as a guideline.
But I was going to add, what we found most amazing in Lovecraft, and always do, like we have a book coming out that is Lovecraftian as well, is his mythology. Like, that's where he rocked. Like, that was his jam, is when you get into the so-and-so begets so-and-so, and that's their elder god, and it's related to this guy. That stuff is gold. It reads like the Bible. Like, there's a reason that Peyote Trip too, yeah. But there's a reason that type of stuff has such endurance. Like, it's just this master craft of mythology and just this kind of world building there, and it's so rich.
It's like Dungeons and Dragons predating Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that I feel like Lovecraft had an amazing sandbox, and that we all got to play with his toys, and we all get to seeing the stories that you made playing with his toys, and the stories that you made playing with his toys, and that we all get to kind of like share those toys and ask, can I borrow that toy for a second? I guess maybe the one thing I'm curious about is, like, is it ever budgetary? Like, in terms of like what you can do with the
always.
Yes.
This is, I can't tell you how many things have been cut out of the films that Stuart and I worked on. I'm really happy with Joe Lynch's Suitable Flesh because he got almost everything in. But it's a sort of a more direct and real world story than the other story than, for example, From Beyond. We're screening From Beyond tomorrow. So yeah, I mean, if you get a chance, come see it. But just a side story on that. When I wrote the script for, there was a whole episode within the story that took place in that Lovecraftian world of non-Euclidean dimensions. And sort of I gave that to the special effects guys at, it was Empire Studios at the time, Charlie Van's Empire. And there are drawings somewhere of that non-Euclidean space. And it was the first thing that was cut. Okay. So they were not going to build that set because that set was too mad to build. So yes, that in Lovecraft is always going to be an issue.
Yeah, is it that you do the Lovecraft pass, the maximalist pass, whatever the pass is that in essence is just like we're doing in the Mountains of Madness. We're going full, like, whole hog, and then that's the first draft, that's the first pass, and then you kind of like rein it in, and you rein it in, and it's like, okay, well, we can't do that, and then it becomes the thing that you almost see.
Yeah, that was a lot of the decisions that we had to make in Glorious, where it was budget. And a lot of it was we were shooting during the pandemic, so we also had to keep kind of our crew and cast footprint really small, because we were shooting in like the height of the pandemic. Like, it was nasty. And so, like, I was never in the same room with my costumer level of having to stay isolated. And so they kept us very separate. And so anything that would require more than 10 people to be on set at one time got nixed. But even things like in the original script, we had, in Lovecraft, otherworldly, it was either space or underwater. And we were like, well, could we mix the two together? And so anytime that we were cutting to kind of what is our now black void, it was supposed to be underwater with stars. Like they were supposed to be floating with stars in the background. And they immediately were like, we can't have a pool. And I was like,
I think we had like an idea of like the water coming out of the toilet. And, like,
the water flooded the entire bathroom, and then stars.
can't we just build
poured
a giant
in.
tank for him to swim in?
I basically wanted the cosmos to pour out of the toilet, and they were like, there's no damn way, Becca. And I was like, what can we do? And I remember the producer saying, have you seen Insidious with the further? And I was like, so a black room filled with fog, huh? And he was like, that's what we can do. And that's what we did. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you get yourself in that mindset of Lovecraft where you're just figuring out, like, the cosmos do this, and then we enter this void. You're speaking these esoteric terms, and then somebody has to bring them back into reality, into a budget.
But the great thing that I do absolutely love about Lovecraft, which will keep me coming back and tapping source material every single time, is that these concepts translate into small spaces. Like, you can do Lovecraft on $20 or you can do it on 200 million. It's definitely, there's stuff that you can cleave from it at any budgetary level, and it's still effective.
Yeah, when we were making the Call of Cthulhu, we just wrote it kind of the way Lovecraft wrote it, and wrote the effects the way he did, and we're like, well, we'll figure it out later. And I think our director of photography almost cried, and then just thought we were kidding him with all the boats on the ocean and islands rising up out of the sea, and then the giant monster and all that. And he's like, no, seriously, guys, what are we going to do in this movie? And fortunately at the time we didn't know any better, so we're like, we're going to make this stuff, and using the aesthetic of the 1920s, where it's literal smoke made out of cardboard, and a lot of the cheats that early filmmaking used to help keep the budgets down ended up being our best friend in terms of making things that if we were not using that 1920s black and white aesthetic, we never would have been able to pull off even remotely. So
you make films in the real world too. You have to write things that actors can do. I know there's CG and you can augment somebody's body. You can make Harrison Ford look young. But when we did Dagon, for example, every frame of that film is wet, is shot in rain or in fog or in water, and the actors hated it. They got sick. It cost time, production time. It was absolutely the right choice for Stewart to make, and it drove Brian Usna, the producer, crazy because it was one production problem after another, and there were characters in hours worth of makeup out in the rain, out in the mist, and that makeup was difficult holding it up. You had to shoot like that. It was all kinds of production problems. So unfortunately, when you write, if this panel is about writing, that's okay. No, yeah, we're doing that. But when it gets to production, as you were saying, it's cardboard and it gets wet and it comes apart. So the more I worked in this business, the more you try to at least take that into account a little bit. But the director is the next writer, and they will take that over and do what they feel that is most effective for the story that they're telling.
I'm asking questions, forgive me, but I'm just so curious. You like the lesson of Jaws is like, oh, the shark doesn't work, so you see less of it. In Alien, you're just kind of building up to this thing, and then eventually you see it. But I feel like with the films that we're talking about, our films, there's that moment where either you see all of it, or you like. I guess what is the ramp up to the final kind of reveal or the kind of exposure of it? Like, is that the kind of tease, or is it like, I don't know, like there's a question in there somewhere, but I'm like trying to build up to like, what is the thing that we're working towards?
So that comes back to kind of filmmaking 101, I'd say, especially how horror films are structured. Like, you never show your monster in the cold open because you have nowhere to go at that point. Like, the monster is essentially your money shot, and you have to work up to that the entire time.
To use
Pornography terminology, exactly. I think it has usurped that. It has grown big.
Okay.
But yeah, like, so it's very much like the traditional, style of doing any type of horror is you just get little tidbits along the way. You'll get the effect of whatever the monster is in the cold open. That's that opening like 5 minutes that you'll always get that kind of tantalizes. And then you'll get little tidbits along the way. And usually, I mean, and this isn't contained to Lovecraft by any stretch, you'll get little pieces of it. Like, you'll see the monster's foot, or you'll see an eye, and kind of move it along like that. Same with Jaws, how the shark kind of comes out. Honestly, like, you never want to show your monster from the get-go for the most part. I mean, you might be able to do that with Godzilla, but I feel like even that, they delay a stretch, because that is still what people are there to see.
And I think with the monster, you have the issue of either people will be disappointed in not seeing the monster at the end, or they're going to be disappointed in what the monster looks like, and you have to kind of balance that out.
Well, what we always, one of the things we were attracted, Stuart and I were attracted to in Lovecraft, is that while Lovecraft there's no lack of monsters in Lovecraft, the real story is about, the danger of you becoming the monster, of you becoming, an Innsmouthian, of you becoming, of Ephraim Waite's mentality taking over your body. There was always the issue of the individual was capable of becoming a monster. We just didn't want to write movies about them versus us, about aliens versus us, but about what we can become, about how the danger is that we are monsters. That was very attractive in Lovecraft, in Lovecraft to us. There are full of monsters, but the real drama in the story is what happens to the protagonist, the danger within. And that's what we were really interested in.
And I think to build on that, when you look at Lovecraft's own life story, he's the fear of the ancestral curse is something literally baked into the man from his childhood, and it manifests itself in different ways in stories. And like, the worst thing that could happen to me is to actually understand my who and what I am and the curse of my lineage. So it's like there's a built-in subjective monster inside the protagonist, as well as these externalized monsters that are out there moving outside beyond him. So it's a great double directional tension, and then generally those two paths tend to collide at the climax of a cinematic telling of the story.
And then you see the monster.
Then you get to see the monster.
So what is the Lovecraft money shot? Like, what's that? That just seems like a big, if we're going porn, like that's a big wiener, just kind of like it's just you're not able to see the whole thing.
Yeah, it's very much like a Cthulhu rising up from the depths type shot always. I mean, you'll get the mutated penguins along the way, and the alien carvings on the wall, but at the end you're going to get the full scope of it.
Let me ask you, those of you who have seen Reanimator, you know what the money shot is? Okay. To some degree, you find it along the way. You find in the story where it's got to be toward the end. You're absolutely right. It might or might not be the last thing. I think when I think about writing, the rhythm that you have to come up in writing in the reveal, there's a rhythm of reveals along in these, and it has to fit into that 3-act structure, and it has to fit into audience satisfaction. But the film I like to relate it to most is Cronenberg's The Fly. Cronenberg was a master at, oh God, it's getting awful. Oh, it's getting worse. Oh, can it get worse than that? Oh no, this is bad. Oh no, that's wow. And then you think, then when Jeff Goldblum is that awful fly thing, you think you've had it, and then there's the last shot in the movie. you know, if I was capable of that kind of genius, you know, I would, you know, I'd be happy to, you know, just mic drop. You know, but that's the issue, and that's a great example of it.
I think it's that final moment when reality, you question reality, where the character no longer knows their own reality, and as a viewer for some of these films, I start questioning my own reality as well. I think there's that moment in the film where you reach that, and that's just, for me, that's the money shot, I guess. I don't know.
And a lot of Lovecraft stories too. They are the nature of the story is an investigation. It's I want to find out about what's at the Mountains of Madness, or what's at the South Sea, or what's in Innsmouth, and the progression through the story is a set of revelations, getting to a deeper and better understanding of what the terrible thing is. And I think that moment you're talking about, the reveal of, you know, the money shot, for lack of a better term, is once it is fully revealed, I understand why these mountains are so horrible, what the curse of Innsmouth is, what, you know, there is a moment where the character has the psychological breakthrough of actually basically solving the underlying mystery, and that solving the mystery usually comes with a reveal of the really horrible thing.
Is it actually called the denouement? Is that instead
No,
of money?
denouement is after your climax. That's the
That's after the
recovery.
climax. Okay.
So I have one last question, I swear. How am I gonna?
I should have just made you the moderator. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, but just okay. You're talking about the journey, the expedition. You know, when you know, with a lot of these stories, they're either kind of a solitary, like, you know, because they're coming from the narrator's point of view. There is this first-person narrative that it is this is the kind of journey that I am going down. How do you? And we're talking about the challenges of how to dramatize that. You either set it, you know, in a, you know, it's one character in one isolated kind of environment, or there's an ensemble. You know, I guess I'm curious, like, how do you kind of break out of that mold of the kind of solitary, or use it to your advantage?
We did other stories. You know, the Reanimator stories, there's two people. There's Herbert West, and there's the unnamed, we named him Dan Kane. There's the unnamed narrator. It's in Innsmouth, there's a story where the narrator is the character. It's a sole narrator. But Thing on the Doorstep has, again, that structure. There's the couple that actually has a female character. It has Asenath. And it has the story of this married couple, but it's told through the vision of a friend of the husband.
We need a Gatsby. We need like the.
Well, it's you know, I hate to get all literary on you, but you know, I think Lovecraftians are a literary crowd. I mean, he exists in literature, but it's a Henry James thing. In Henry James, there's always a register. It's the person who tells the story. It's called a register. The person who tells the story is the person who registers the experience that other people are having and tries to understand it. And in trying to understand it, leads you toward understanding and then away from it and then back toward it again. And part of it is is that impressionistic structure of you trying to see through this other person's perspective and finding out what the real story is. And that Lovecraft uses that in a number of his stories, uses that Jamesian structure. I know he related himself to Poe very often. Poe has those characters who are going mad. They're the storyteller is the person who is going mad, the Telltale Heart. But Lovecraft has several stories, and those are some of the ones that we picked on, where there's a register, there's another character. And that character ends up, for example, in Thing on the Doorstep, ends up being critical to the end of the story, ends up getting totally involved in the story and sacrificing their own identity. So, you know, Lovecraft wrote in a number of different structures, and we were we were happy to take those that fit a slightly better storytelling mode.
I was going to change gears a little. Is this on? I was going to change gears a little bit and ask Clay about writing Late Bloomer and then having that adapted because it is a short film and it is comedic. Can you talk a little bit about what prompted you to take sex ed into the Lovecraftian, other than the obvious, into this Lovecraftian realm and then craft this beautiful little story?
Yeah, I mean, it's very silly. I was teaching a playwriting workshop for high school students in the state of Virginia, and I was the playwright in residence. And before the program even began, they were like, okay, the things you cannot talk about are this, 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 and this. And it's because they're kids, they're teens. And I was like, well, they're talking about these things. And as soon as they told me I couldn't, I was like, that's all I want to talk about now. and I was like, and it wasn't so much like, hey guys, let's talk about sex. But it was just like, when it's like, don't think of a pink elephant, like that's all. And I just like short circuited. So I was like, I need to get this out. And that kind of dovetailed into this silly story about, taking Lovecraft and what would be one of the more inappropriate places to kind of set a piece of fanfic. And I thought, a 7th grade sex ed class would be a wonderful place because the for me, it's always what starts, if you have this column here and you have this column there, these are the kind of Lovecraftian themes and these are the sex edian themes, and you can kind of see certain kind of parallels. And it was just, to be blunt, it was just very kind of, easy to be like, this is kind of looks like this and it looks like that, and but the whole point to that is that with an emotionally stunted who doesn't understand his own body or the female body or the male,
You're describing Lovecraft.
It was just there. It was wonderful to just kind of open that can of worms and let it all out.
Can of worms.
With the literal money shot.
Is it okay if we open up the question?
Yeah, this may be, a massive segue, but when I try to have discussions with people about Lovecraft film and everything, my touchstone, and I'm embarrassed that I don't have the title in my head, it's a short story by Adam Scott. He takes half of a paragraph where they bring a regiment of Marines into Innsmouth to clear the town out. So it's 24 hours of pure horror of the Marines versus everything from people to shut-outs running down Main Street. And it's absolutely brilliant pulp, but it never, ever stops being pure Lovecraft. And so I'm just thinking, that's how deep the springs are. You can go to the material and you can expand half a paragraph into what should be the next, pulp adventure novel. But I keep going back to that story as an example of how much fun it can be.
Neil Gaiman has a story about somebody challenged him to write a Sherlock Holmes story in the Lovecraftian universe, and it's a very sick story. Great writers. Lovecraft is still generating fiction in other great writers' imaginations.
Yeah. And I think that that's really kind of how you can tell good mythology, good core material. We wrote the comic books for Hellraiser. We wrote the last 3 that they
From the
did.
anthology,
From
yeah.
the anthology from 3 years ago. And it was the same thing where when you're tapping, where do you even begin? Because they're whole new spaces. You've got this core stuff that you're working with, which is very Lovecraftian in nature, actually, Hellraiser is. And so you're still looking at this core mythology, and then that you can take and make your own story, and it becomes this boundless world because of that, as long as you're kind of adhering to that original core belief.
Yeah, I think Barker has another story that we had been wanting to adapt for a long time, and it was like a page long story about the house.
Oh, yeah.
The
don't even
shitting on the stairs or something. What was it?
Shitting on the stairs.
The shitting on the stairs stories. Yeah, I know. Yeah. But it was this just guy's journey of going completely insane. It's a page long.
It's literally a
and
page long about a guy who thinks that he lives with a demon.
Yeah.
And he starts like baiting the demon, and he finds shit on the stairs in one of them, and he finds out the demon.
And I think he finds out it's him or something.
Yeah, but it's literally a page long. But we were like, just that in its core is such a cool concept that we can immediately see how to build something out of it. And that's always how I look at Lovecraft is, you know, some of the ways that he presents stuff may now seem a little antiquated, but it's always that idea, that hook.
Yeah, I think that what I like about Lovecraft is that there's a web of influence with him, where it's not just going back to the source material, but you're going back to other material that has been made already, and you're borrowing from other mythos that's also from Lovecraft.
Yeah, that's Sandbox.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to add we play a lot in that sandbox and do the same sort of thing. I've done a sequel to the Call of Cthulhu, you know, looking at what else has Inspector Legrasse done before the events that happen in the story. And, you know, we've done a series of 1930 style audio dramas. And with a bunch of them, when we take a shorter work and want to build it out to feature length, it's usually a breeze, because all you really need to do is take one story thread or one character and just flesh it out in a way that Lovecraft didn't flesh it out, and suddenly something that's a short story can be built into being a rich and satisfying, and frankly a more satisfying feature-length story than the short story was.
We told the whole story of From Beyond before the credits.
Circle back to the idea of horror on screen. Are there examples of your own work or other creators' work on screen that you say that's cosmic? Even if it's just a moment, scenes.
A lot.
I'm doing an entire keynote tonight on what is cosmic horror, so feel free to swing by at 7 o'clock. I'm going to be defining it and looking at contemporary examples. But I know we definitely watched a lot when we were writing Glorious and kind of thinking about how we wanted to shoot it. And the biggest thing that I've always felt is cosmic horror is not always the cosmos. Like, everybody is immediately like, especially because when you make a cosmic horror, everybody gets confused about that as a marketing term. Like, oh, is Star Wars a cosmic horror? And immediately, no. So yeah, it's like this real kind of nerdy minutia that you want to get into there. But for Lovecraft, cosmic horror was not always cosmos. Like, I look at Jacob's Ladder as a cosmic horror. I look at Donnie Darko as a cosmic horror. So for me, the cosmic horrors are not always going to be necessarily this space. It's going to be something that's more about crossing a plane that you can't return from.
Fulci's The Beyond.
It's a great one. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, one of the it is an interesting thing, because cosmic horror is an intellectual concept, and as we sort of started the discussion with, drama is not built on intellectual concept. Drama is built on action and conflict, and so a lot of the really successful films that make use of cosmic through kind of an allegorical level, that something is happening in terms of the actual physical world that is a reflection of the greater cosmic problems that are out there waiting for us all. So you can look at a film like The Thing, and in the front story you've got a creature and paranoia and people running around an Antarctic base, but when you open up the lens on that and think about it, suddenly you widen the scope to not just the problem of those men there on the base, but it's a problem for everybody in the whole universe. And I think that's kind of how I think the most successful films tend to work, is that the action of the film is setting up a mirror to the reveal of all the really big problems that underlie existence itself.
Has anybody read Hammers on Bone, Cassandra Caw? I think it's a good, more recent cosmic horror. Also reminds me of Cast a Deadly Spell. Mm-hmm. Has vibes of that too.
Yeah.
So.
Clay,
I had one, but I wasn't gonna say it.
Do it.
I mean, this is so silly. It's the hypothetical. It's the softball question. But like if budget was no problem, like if the blank check was just waiting for you, what would you do with it? Would you go whole hog? Would you do the
Star Wars as a cosmic horror.
Yeah, we talked
next
about
chapter.
this. We had this conversation. Is there a cosmic horror version of Star Wars? Like, you'd lean hard into like the midichlorians and the Force and all of that, but we were like, there's something. I'll say, much like you did, when we suddenly found that budgets and how we wanted to kind of explore Lovecraft, it became a problem. We started writing books. And so we have one called Pretty Evil coming out next spring from Simon & Schuster, which is it's teen, but it's Evil Dead Lovecraftian all the way. And it was for teenage girls. But it was just that, you know what, we had pitched that around, the concept we'd pitched around as a TV show for a long time, and Freeform had loved it, and WB had loved it, and we had been all over the place, and everybody kept telling that the budget was too high. So we were just like, well, if it's that great of an idea, we're going to do that on our own, and we did. Just kind of, that's where we'll always push. But that said, my dream one that I have seen so many versions of Dreams of the Witch House done, and that is one. That I feel like there is something that you can really contemporize there because of kind of the architecture of houses I'm into. Dave and I have long had this shared nightmare, and maybe this was from living in a single room studio in New York City, where we find a room behind a wall in our house. Like, we've had that nightmare so many times, and sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not. But that is one that I feel like there is such a contemporary version of it, but as soon as you get into architecture, time-traveling witch, or rat, human-faced rat, like, producers immediately, they're like, what's your source material?
We did it for Masters of Horror.
Yeah.
Brown. One of my points of pride is I brought Brown Jenkin, one of the people who brought Brown Jenkin to the screen. We absolutely were able to contemporize it because Lovecraft's. Stewart talks about this in his autobiography, in his memoir that just came out. I won't call it an autobiography because it gets a lot of things wrong, and don't believe anything he said about me. He talks about this, is that Lovecraft is absolutely contemporary. His insight into the science of his time was prescient in relation to the science of our time, and that multidimensional going into the non-Euclidean universe is string theory. It's absolutely, if you know a little bit about string theory, it's actually string theory. There are 11 universes that bounce into each other and cross each other, allowing for crossover at certain times. It's you were able to use that as the structure for the movement into non-Euclidean space that the witch comes through in our Dreams of the Witch House. So it's absolutely, Lovecraft is absolutely contemporary in that. I don't want to do it, but what I'd like to see is a live-action version of Rick and Morty. They tell. There are so many plots, and they tell so much story in 25 minutes. It's unbelievable. I'm a huge fan.
If we get the check, we'll do what Guillermo has not done, which is the big budget version of At the Mountains of Madness. So, and there's good reason. I get why people don't want to give him $300 million to go make that movie. That's a lot, and it's a tricky story. But I think as an audience member, wouldn't you love to see that? So anyway, if we win the lotto, we'll make it for you. But in the meantime, our antidote to budget woes, though, has been producing in the audio world. We're just making movies with no picture, and then it's like anything you want to do. There are no special effects problems. You just write it in, and solving something with Foley. You want a room filled to the surface with water and stars. In the audio, it's a breeze. Doing it visually is a pain. So anyway, that's our solution. So.
I would bankroll all of your movies. That's what I would do.
We'll talk. By the way, Clay, it's good to see you. I didn't get to
I
see you
haven't
before.
seen you since
Since
Dixon Place. Do you
yeah,
remember
no,
me?
I remember exactly.
I haven't.
He invited me to a pumpkin spice show, I think.
Pumpkin pie show,
Pumpkin
yeah.
pie show, yeah, that's right. It's pumpkin spice now, I'm sure. But no, thank you. That was really fun. That was really fun.
I was gonna be like, excuse me, do you remember me? After this
I
was
did
over.
that because I had to tell Clay this story yesterday. 20 years ago, I was teaching horror filmmaking at Hunter College. And there was one day I was queuing up and I was teaching the class on Lovecraft. And I'd put up Dagon on the screen and nobody was in the class yet. My classroom was empty. I had like a big lecture hall like this. And all of a sudden, this head pops in and he goes, "What you showing?" And I was like, "Dagon." And he goes, "I wrote that." And I was like, "The fuck you did?" And then it dawned on me that Dennis lives in New York and he works at Hunter. And then I made him stick around and talk to my class. And it was awesome. And that was, at the time I was working at Fangoria, and then I went back and I was like, Tony, did you guys know Dennis works at Hunter? And they were like, of course he does, Becca. It was just like such an obvious thing I didn't know. But yeah, that was about 20 years ago.
Horror is a small world, and it's especially a small world in New York. And it's a great small world. It is terrific.
I would love for each of you to kind of like tell us where we can find you on social media. We need to wrap up for the next. Sorry. You guys are going to be around for a while. Dennis, you're going to be here. Clay, Becca, David, and Sean will be around. Shanghai them in the hallways or in the lobby, in line for concession, and tell us what you're working on next, or what kind of project we can see from you kind of in the near future, and where people can learn more about what you're doing and what your company is doing on the internets.
I'm going to be crass and I'm going to jump in first because I have at 4 o'clock in 11 minutes at the other side of the theater, I'm doing a reading. So if anyone's looking for something to do, I'll give you wham bam, thank you ma'am, money shot for free. And then downstairs, Broadway Books has a little booth and they are selling books that I wrote. So if you're looking for something spooky and cosmic to read, that's where you should go.
Pretty Evil, our graphic novel, comes out in 2024.
From Simon & Schuster.
From Simon & Schuster.
We have a couple other books that are on the horizon, all of which are Lovecraftian, but we can't talk about those yet. So we'll just say you can follow us on socials, Rebekah and David McKendry. And
I'm only on Instagram, and it's usually just pictures of bread.
It's true.
And drums.
It's true. Phone booths and occasionally dogs, and that's it. You can find me. You can also, I have a podcast, Colors of the Dark, that is through the Fangoria Podcast Network. And I'll also, I should have been talking about films. Every film I was attached to has been pushed because of the strikes. So I'm attached to a bunch of films. So there will be more coming. I just can't talk about them yet.
If you're allergic to gluten, that is a terrible website. That is a terrible Instagram site.
We're allergic to nuts, not gluten, so we're good.
No, okay. Between projects, I go into absolute hiding, so I can't be found. That's actually true. I'm not on social media, but I just came out from under the strike, which was, by the way, glorious. It was wonderful to be out there with other writers. It was wonderful to be out there. The actors at SAG-AFTRA, please support them. They came out in support of us. The IATSE, the crew members. It was as collaborative as filmmaking itself. It was actual wonderful experience, as awful as it was. But now that I'm out, I'll be going around to a number of festivals and supporting the movie because the actors can't, because Barbara can't go out. Barbara and Judah and Heather and Jonathan can't go out and support the movie. So it'll be Joe and I going out. Sorry about that. It'd be nice to see Barbara, wouldn't it? I'll be around doing that. I'm going to be signing this. I'm sorry, Clay. But go see him and then come see me. I am working. I got a couple of outlines out there, that I can't talk about. We can never talk about the next project.
Never.
So, there's something coming. So look for it, and that's when you'll see me next, when the next project is out. But I got to say, it was terrific to be invited to this once the strike was over, and I'm very grateful. And this is so much fun talking to you guys. Thank you.
I'm and my colleague Andrew Lehman run the HP Lovecraft Historical Society. We have a website where we're all out there making all kinds of new stuff. We have a couple of new episodes of Dark Adventure Radio Theater that are actually in production. Hopefully one will hit before the holidays and one will come out the first quarter next year. We got a bunch of book stuff in the pipeline. We've got a bunch of game stuff in the pipeline. So if you dig the weird stuff we do, a whole slew of it is coming your way. So are we building a bigger Zeppelin? Nobody's ever asked us that before. I don't know where we'd moor it if we had to park a bigger Zeppelin. So, not in New Jersey. Learned that lesson the hard way. Yeah. So, but yeah, and we have several film and television projects that are written but don't have homes yet. But at the moment, we got a bunch of audio and book and game products that are coming down the pike. So, anyway, Lovecraft Historical Society. That's us. So. And Gwen, thank you so much for having us here as part of this.